Okay, hi folks, thanks for coming back and listening to our podcast on the Battle of Britain and various appended subjects. I'm joined in the studio again today by my old friend Andy Long, who for years has been researching the history of the Boulton-Paul Defiant aircraft, and his book Defiant by Day and Night will be published by Pen and Sword in due course, not far from the finishing post now, Andy.
No, really close.
At last, well done. It's been a Herculean effort to accumulate this enormous amount of material and really understand this aircraft, I think, in a way that nobody else ever has before. I don't think it's possible with the amount of research you've done. Phenomenal.
Thank you.
So, well done, and we can't wait to see the book. So the idea of these pods, and we filmed a couple of short videos yesterday, is just to introduce the Defiant really, and introduce Andy prior to his book coming out. I mean, Andy's been involved in this game for as long as I have, and in fact, well, we go back way over 40 years now.
Yeah.
So the man knows his stuff, and the Defiant is often a much maligned and often misunderstood in some ways aircraft, which was not as successful as it was hoped for all kinds of different reasons, and we've covered some of those reasons in the first pod, which sort of looked at how the Defiant turret fighter came about in an age of single-seater, single-engine fighters. This is a two-man aircraft with a big heavy turret with 4 Browning machine guns and no fixed forward-firing armament. So, bit of a strange airplane, really, considering the time that it was produced. But we've already talked about all that. So, what we're going to talk about now is the aircraft's operational history. And we'll divide that into two segments, I think, Andy. We want to look at the Defiant by day and the Defiant by night.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, talk me through it. So, we're the 3rd of September 1939. Britain has declared war on Germany. What's happening to the Defiant at that time?
It's just in the process of actually coming online, because first Defiants were that late to actually get into service, and 264 were...
So there's 2 Defiant squadrons.
At the start of the war,
Yeah.
there's just 264. 141 later came
along later.
Along later. So you've got 264 starting to receive their Defiants, starting to get experience, also flying fairy battles as lead-in trainers, and obviously going through the process of working out tactics on how to actually use the Defiant in combat efficiently. The tactics side of it actually culminated in a conference at HQ Fighter Command, where they came up with 4 prescribed set attacks, simply 1, 2, 3 and 4, line astern, crossover, flanking attacks, which were to be used against their targets. And it wasn't long after that they were thrown into combat when the Germans invaded through the Low Countries, and on the 12th of May 264 Squadron found themselves in action over Holland, flying from Horsham St Faith, which is now Norwich Airport. They went out as a composite flight with 66 Squadron, and during that engagement scored their first kills, which was a Ju-88 and a Heinkel 111. Philip Hunter claimed one, and Nicholas Cook claimed the other. Elated, they returned to base and were hoping to repeat the same success the following day. 2 different flights went out, once again with 66, with a totally different result. In the battle over the Dutch Biesbosch, 5 of the aircraft were lost. A lot of crewmen lost, killed or taken prisoner, and only Des Mouse and his Des Mouse K, as he was known, the only one that made it back. And it was a very, very sobering thing for them that they've had one day where they think that they absolutely got it nailed with a composite squadron set up, and they brought down their first kills. And then this time they've gone in for a flight of Stukas, and then got bounced by JG-26.
109s.
Yeah, the 109s.
Yeah.
One of the crews even ended up dogfighting with a Stuka. There was a very, very determined Stuka pilot who was on the tail of one of them, with a 109 giving support to try and bring them down. So so they've gone back, and one aircraft has made it back. One damaged aircraft has made it back. Some of the aircrew actually managed to evade and come through, and one of the aircrew was only officially recognised and buried with a headstone last September.
Right.
Was John Stewart Mead Bromley, an air gunner from Liverpool.
Right.
So they've gone from having a great day to having the rug pulled from under them, a very, very sort of like sharp learning process there. They then find themselves...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We're talking about this composite squadron idea, and perhaps you ought to explain what that means. So you've got a flight of Defiance, say, or a section of Defiance, protected, escorted by a section or a flight of Spitfires.
Yeah.
So there must therefore have been a realisation that the Defiant wasn't going to be capable of fighting by day on its own.
No, it was the idea. I would say with a composite flight, composite squadron, that you would have the Defiance with support from the single seaters. When they flew their first operation with 66 Squadron on the 12th of May, they felt it was 66 Squadron thought it was absolutely superb, especially when they flew out in formation with the Spitfires to the front and the Defiance to the rear, because then the Defiant air gunners were covering the rear of the actual formation. However, the following day, with different pilots, different flights involved, and facing Stukas and 109s, this composite squadron had got fragmented. And
of course, 66 Squadron, very experienced Spitfire squadron.
Oh yeah.
I mean, second RAF second Spitfire squadron.
Indeed. Yeah. And once and this goes for any aerial combat where a Defiant is involved, that once their formation has been broken, fragmented, that's when they're in real trouble. Because there was a certain element of mutual support if they've kept a formation. Break that formation, it's an issue. We did copy the Germans with the Messerschmitt 110 descending circle, that they were able to form a tight circle.
See, it's an interesting one, that is, though, because that it's known as a defensive circle, but it wasn't. It was also an offensive tactic as well, that circle, because somebody gets in the circle and they're going to get shot down pretty flipping quickly.
Yeah. But the Germans, interestingly, there was a word called Kugelfangen, which the Germans used to use in relation to the Messerschmitt 110s getting to the circle. And Kugelfangen is, in a loose translation, is the one to get the bullet. Because they said once they called this defensive circle, there was a race to get this circle completed, and the Germans said last one in gets the bullet.
Right.
But yeah, so we've got 264 who were able to use the crossover attacks. Later on, we're now going away from operations over Holland, and now they're supporting the French campaign, Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And
there was a bit of success, wasn't there, to start with?
Oh, yeah.
The myth, about the 109s getting clobbered because they mistook them, understandably, for Spitfires or Hurricanes and attacked from the 6 o'clock position and got shot up, didn't they?
Yeah, it's interesting because people sometimes do actually bring that up. The origin of that comes from a combat report written by Fred Barker, the most successful Defiant air gunner, and he actually puts in there about the 109s. He said, "I think they mistook us for Hurricanes," and that is where it's gone from there.
Yeah.
At the end of May 1940, when 264 had finished their Dunkirk campaign, their operational records book, their summary, it brings up 5 or 6 points at the end of May, and one of them in there is I think the enemy fighters mistook us for Hurricanes. So that's how it's like progressed. But Fred Barker had obviously put it in his report that he had felt that way.
Right.
But yeah, so when it came to 264 operating during the French and Dunkirk campaign, yes, they did have success. They felt that they had more success operating off the coasts as opposed to actually operating over land. And of course, there's the mythical Defiant Day, where they ran up 37 kills on that day over 2 sorties. Now, this has been repeated. It's an amazing story. However, when you look at the German quartermaster's returns, and this, I want to point out, this is not taking it away from any of the bravery of any of the crews involved over there or who made claims. When you look at the German quartermaster's returns, and you look at the 37 or so claims that 264 made, it would almost be that 264 were the only squadron to have been operating. It was far from it. And then there's a couple of combat reports where it does actually say issues. Sorry, I just got distracted there. I've lost my train of thought. I do apologise. We were on about the Defiant Day, and not to distract away from, obviously, the bravery of the crews, but there are some combat reports out there which actually state that air gunners felt that there were an issue with overclaiming, because you could have three Defiant air gunners hitting the same target at the same time. So when you look at their claims, the 264 Squadron Association many years ago thought that they could have probably had up to 14, other figures say maybe about 8, but it's gone into RAF mythology about this one particular day, and the question's asked, why was it allowed to get this far? Well, you've got to remember, we were backs against the wall, and very much in the case of modern PR and spin, the Ministry of Information got hold of the story and it was transmitted out, and it got worldwide, absolutely worldwide, and I was thinking very much that time it was a morale booster.
Right.
And 264 later on in 1940, when they were at Duxford, they had a sign down the road which actually proclaimed 264 Squadron and the 37 kills in a day. So, and of course, they lost crews. They lost some to mid-air collisions. They lost some to fighters. Guy Hickman, 19-year-old, exceptionally good, youngest Defiant pilot at the time. He was an exceptionally good shot, really good, very, very tall guy. He unfortunately was killed. Nicholas Cook and Albert Lippett. That we'll do a bit about them later. But yeah, they did their part.
So let's just track this back a bit. We got the Defiant now, that's been brought online because there's a perception amongst some senior air marshals that it is going to emulate the success of the Bristol fighter in the First World War by day.
Yeah.
And it equally, Boulton Paul have designed this aircraft to also fly and fight at night if necessary, which was not the case, of course, with the Spitfire and Hurricane, which were designed exclusively as day fighters, even though they were also both used at night. So desperate was indeed the hour. However, so by day, the Defiant first sees action over the Netherlands,
Yeah.
then off over France and the French coast during the Dunkirk evacuation time,
Yeah.
the fall of France. Defiant squadrons, of course, didn't operate from France itself,
No.
nor did Spitfires. So this was the first time that, indeed, the Spitfire met the 109 for the first time in May 1940 over the French coast. And the Defiant the same, isn't it? So we've had this situation where there's a little bit of success, but then a disaster.
Yeah.
And we then go into the Battle of Britain, and we've only got the 2 Defiant squadrons,
Yeah.
which Dowding was against right from the outset anyway, because he felt that it was Spitfires and Hurricanes that he needed. So the Defiant squadrons, they are down in 11 group in the Battle of Britain. And what happens then? What happens on the 19th of July 1940?
Well, it's 141 Squadron. Once they'd received their Defiant,
And they're at Gravesend, weren't they, at the time?
West Malling,
Yeah.
and flew forward to Hawkinge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But once they had swapped out, this months before, they were originally flying Blenheims and Gladiators, and then they had their those swapped out for Defiance to become the 2nd Defiant Squadron. They spent most of their time up in Scotland until they were brought down in July to the group, flying out of West Malling or Biggin Hill, flying forward. They flew around 60 operational sorties. And they were also going through a process of having their existing airframes upgraded with constant speed units. But on the 19th of July, they were ordered from West Malling to Hawkinge on standby. And all of a sudden, while they were there, they were ordered to scramble and sent to a point at off Cap Green. And this is where there are many versions of what went wrong. Versions that criticise...
What did go wrong then?
Yeah.
Tell us what went wrong. What happened?
Simply, they were sent out to meet another squadron, which they didn't locate or never showed.
And that was a squadron of what?
Of Spitfires.
Spitfires, right.
And there should have been 12 Defiants. There were 9 that took off. They were totally alone, and they were sent to a point at a mere 5,000 feet off the French coast, where they were spotted by around 20, maybe 25 Messerschmitt 109s from JG51.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful, sunny, clear day. It was that clear that German pilots said that they could actually, in the channel, see the aircraft taking off from Hawkins in the distance.
Right.
And they had the advantage, they had the height, they had the speed, and they bounced this formation. They were flying in Vic line astern, as 264 had done on many occasions, so they weren't doing anything wrong, but they were simply surprised. The air gunners spotted some attack. A lot of people have said that the attack was never spotted. Malcolm Loudon, one of the flight commanders, he spotted it, and they tried to counter it by pulling the formation into a tight climbing left-hand turn, but by that time it was just too late. Subsequently, 10 aircrew lost their lives.
The slaughter of the innocent.
Which apparently was coined by Douglas Bader.
Was it really?
Yes, it was. Yeah, so this was their one and only daylight engagement with the Luftwaffe. So 9 have taken off. As what I've since also found out, Australian guy called Noel Constantine in the 10th Defiant took off on his own,
right.
And actually, as he's flying out, he's seeing the tail end of what's been going on with aircraft going down, and what have you. And he comes back with the 3 survivors.
Right.
That evening, Squadron Leader Richardson, who to a certain extent had been a vocal opponent of the of the Defiant, but a highly experienced guy. Nearly 1,900 flying hours in his logbook. Pre-war aerobatic pilot with, from Kenley. He was called up to Flight Command HQ, debriefed, and they made a decision that 141 was to be stood down, and within 48 hours they were pulled out of the group, despite him saying, look, other squadrons have had losses early on, we want to stay in the group, and it wasn't to be. No. And they went back to Scotland within 48 hours.
What I find astonishing, when I was writing the big 8-volume history, which is day by day, that after that disaster, and after the disaster over the continent, that they brought the Defiants back into 11 Group in August to Hornchurch and operating from Manston, which led to another disaster, didn't it?
Oh, hindsight is a very powerful thing, but when you look at it, they are aware of the shortcomings of the Defiant. 264 left Curtin in Lindsay, went to Hornchurch, and in a very short window were operating at Hornchurch, but invariably they had to go forward and operate from the likes of Manston, right in the firing line.
Yeah.
And over a period of like 4 days or so, they found out that this was an incredibly unhealthy place to actually be in a Defiant. Philip Hunter, their enigmatic CO, was lost. Experienced crews were now starting to get the chop. They couldn't keep up with the wastage of Defiants. There weren't enough Defiants actually coming through. They had too many aircrew, not enough aircraft, and it all culminated on the 28th of August when JG-26, Gerhard Schofel, Adolf Galland and all that got amongst a formation being led by George Garvin, who was to be the new squadron leader to take over from Philip Hunter, but Philip Hunter had stayed on to make sure that they were in a good position with him, but he was leading the squadron, and he pulled the squadron into a line astern formation to make one of the crossover attacks against a formation of bombers. And what they didn't see was, until too late, was the fact that there was all these 109s above them, and they went in and had a field day, and they lost some of the experienced crews like David Bull Whitley and Sam Turner.
And that was it then,
and that was it.
That was it. That's the Defiant withdrawn from the daylight battle.
Oh yeah.
At last. Now, what we're going to do, because we've got there's 23 minutes we've been chatting for, I think we'll do the next pod, and we'll cover the Defiant by night in that one separately, because that is quite a story, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
So basically we've now got how the Defiant came to be, what the rationale was, the technical aspects of the Defiant, and the daylight operational history. So after that disaster on the 28th of August 1940 in the Battle of Britain, which followed on from the slaughter of the innocents, the Defiant is withdrawn from the daylight battle. And in the next pod we'll talk about what happened next, and I think it's actually a little bit more encouraging really for the Defiant story about the contribution it made to Britain's night defence. So we'll talk about that next time. So thanks for listening, and if you like what we do, please come back, subscribe to the channel. We've got over 60 videos and pods online now. We're producing new content all the time. It's often based on the very latest research into these subjects that we're talking about, and we'll be back soon. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.